In this episode, I get to speak with Robert Ingalls, a once lawyer gone rogue. When he realized that he was at a crossroad, this new road led him to podcasting and assisting other law firms to reach their marketing goals. Listen in for more. Robert and I can keep a conversation going, and boy did we. We spoke for almost 1 recorded hour. For this reason, we've divided this episode into 2 parts. Enjoy our first part of episode 18 with Robert Ingalls. Before we get into this episode, we would like to thank our Season 4 sponsor, Affirm Investigative Solutions, your go-to litigation support company. Without them, we would not be able to keep upgrading and integrating new concepts to this growing podcast. If you would like to take your support further, feel free to hit the support button on our Let's Talk Paralegal website so we can continue providing quality and empowering content for you and all our listeners. Welcome to the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast. I'm your host, Ada Rosa, and today I have the amazing Robert. He's from the hosting of Law Pods, right? And did I get that right?
Yes, Law Pods.
Podcast, and he was also an attorney. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about you, what you do, and how you went from attorney to kind of what you do now?
Well, that is a big open-ended question you're going to have to reel me in on.
Yeah, no worries. I'll keep you focused today.
Yeah. So I have a background in law. I spent about 7 years in practice, most of that just in a small firm with my name on the door, a handful of employees. And in the beginning, you spend all this time and energy and money getting in this career. And a lot of people like me had a lot of family support along the way. And you get there and you're like, this sucks. Like, I don't like this. But in order to be successful, you've also learned that when things get hard, you lean in. That's what separates people who do from people who don't, is we lean in when things get hard. We like hard things. And my first solution was, got to lean in, got to make it work, got to find the right strategy for time management, have to meditate more, have to do all the things to fit my square peg in the round hole. And it took a while, and I'm glad, because it made me give the law a proper shake. Criminal defense for a few years couldn't make that work. Couldn't sleep well at night.
I don't think anybody can at this point.
It's tough. It takes a really special person. I have some good mentors in that field. I've met a lot of amazing people in that field, and it takes a very special human to thrive in that field and be able to wake up every day and not let it rub their face in the ground. But I am not that person. And then a few more years in general civil, and it's really the constant conflict that beat me down. And I really like it, for better or for worse, when everybody around me kind of likes me. It just makes my day pleasant. When I talk to people and they're like, I love talking to this guy. You see it on their face. They see you and they smile, and you're like, they like talking to me. I like that. It makes me feel really good throughout my day. And that was not the case when I was any kind of lawyer. On any given day, especially in criminal defense, I am the bad guy in someone's movie. Like, I'm the villain, or at least the co-villain. and I hated that. And they were usually right, especially in criminal defense. Like, frequently they were right. I am championing the antagonist here. And I didn't like that. And so eventually it just got too heavy, and it really came to a head when, right after I got married, my wife just came up to me seemingly out of the blue and was like, I want to have a baby. And we had discussed this, but it was more like future people's problem. And I guess, like, right after we got married, I think she started doing math and was like, we are not spring chickens. And we weren't. But at that moment, it went from future guy's problem to today guy's problem. And that was the proverbial straw that broke my back. And I kind of had a proper freak out, mostly unbeknownst to her. But it really sent me reeling, because I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I don't know what to do, I'm barely holding on. And now somebody's going to live here next year. And I've got to be their primary caregiver, one of them, and mentors, and financially responsible for them, which I also wasn't making that much money at the time.
Right.
And that once I kind of pulled it back together, I sat down and I made a list. And at the top of the list was money. Got to fix that or none of the rest of it matters. And I read a money book. And that money book, the author also had a leadership book. I'm running a law office. I got employees showing up two hours late for work. And
I know about
I
that.
had, yeah, when I just had no leadership skills because I hadn't developed the mindset yet of you learn everything, you don't just know things. And so I read this leadership book, and the leadership book said you should listen to our podcast. I'd never listened to a podcast before. And so I pulled out my phone, I turned on this podcast, and it wasn't really for me, but I listened to that episode and I'm in the app and I'm thinking, okay, well, leadership, that's something I'd like to know more about. I'll keep doing that. And I type in something about office leadership and Awesome Office. This podcast, Awesome Office, comes up. They're not publishing anymore, but the first two episodes were with Tom Bilyeu, founder of Quest Nutrition. And it changed the course of my life. Like there was before that and after that. And I can boil down into just a short phrase what he told me over the course of those two episodes. And it was, you can do anything you want with your life.
Yeah.
And I'd heard that so many times it was trite, but I heard it. I felt it. And I really thought in that moment, I know where I was. And I thought, I think I can do anything I want, because I felt locked. I felt like you go to school, you get the degree, you go to more school, you get the other degree, you pass the test, you do the thing, and this is what you do. And the idea that I could just say, nah, I don't like that, I'm gonna do something else, it had never occurred to me really. And in that moment, it occurred to me. I had zero idea what it was gonna be.
Now let's pause there because I have like a kind of like a curiosity question. It never occurred to you, and this happens often, even for paralegals, and it happens to us in the reverse, right? Where we are thinking we have to be lawyers in order to make more money, we have to do this in order to make more money. And so most of senior paralegals I've seen go to law school and like in the first year be like, nah, negative, I'm not, this is not for me.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we try to prevent here at the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast. We try to provide, limitless mindset and, learn teaching and giving them information to where, you can pivot at any time and you can do basically whatever you want. But that's not really a societal norm, right? That's not how we were, at least from my knowledge or my general knowledge or my general research. The babies from like the 70s, 80s, and 90s. It was very traditional. I think it ended at the 90s. I think the 2000ers got a lot more savvy because of technology and Google and access to the rest of the world and how the rest of the world thinks. And they said we kind of got it good here, compared to other countries. And so they, their mindset has changed a lot. And I know that because those are my nieces and nephews. And I see the definite shift in how they're looking at, okay, yeah, sure, I'm gonna go to college, but I'm actually gonna do something with this degree, and I'm actually going to just stop here. I'm not going to become a doctor, an engineer, an astronaut, or a lawyer, which is kind of what we grew up as. But my question to you is, do you think that had a lot to do with that mindset that you had before you heard that podcast?
Oh, absolutely. It was one that was one of the things I learned in that podcast was the idea of mindset. That was not, I maybe I'd heard it somewhere, but it wasn't something that had sunk in. And he discusses in that episode the book Mindset by Carol Dweck, which I've read multiple times over the years now, but which I immediately within that week read.
Yeah.
And just incredible shift there because I was a very classic fixed mindset. This is who I am. I said for 35 years, I'm not creative. That is a lie that I told myself over and over and over until it became my reality. I didn't even make space in my life for creativity because I told myself I wasn't creative.
Interesting.
because I tried so many times to play guitar and my friends would pick it right up and they'd figure it out and they're like, oh, and they're getting it. And it was so hard. Every little thing I learned came at such great cost. And then trying to draw, just no ability. My handwriting, my first grade daughter has better handwriting today than I do.
I hear
And
you. I'm a left-hander. I got you.
and and so learning to draw, I had nothing there and I just painting none of it. And so I'm not creative. The kind of things that you hear people say it all the time.
Mhm.
I'm just not good at math. And that was my entire mindset was so fixed. And then all of a sudden I'm learning, no, 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 that none of this is true.
Mhm.
Yet, one word, I'm not creative yet is fine. Or whatever. I don't play guitar yet.
Mhm.
And you learn from that yes, some things are going to be easier for some people than others,
Mhm.
but you can do whatever you want with your life. Where are you willing to put your attention?
Yeah.
Where are you willing to be bad in order to be good? And that was incredible for me. But it also helped me understand when you say that you're not creative, you're shutting yourself down from even trying new things.
Mm.
And I'm still not much of a guitar player. I still
Yeah.
don't draw. I still don't paint. But what I do is I write marketing copy. I create jingles and voiceovers and I write these things and we turn them into these beautiful pieces of marketing that some of the most prolific law firms in the world use
Yeah.
in their marketing strategies. I am bananas creative and and I say that with as much humility as I can because I just am. And one of the things I've learned about myself is I'm not I am less happy when I'm not able to be creative. If I can't exercise that little bit of a demon in me almost, I've got it in there and I got to get it out. And
Mm.
when I sit for a few hours and I get some of it out,
Yeah.
and and that was something that looking back over my life, I've always been wound so tight and so anxious. And it's because I was holding all of that in all the time.
Yeah, suppression.
And
Suppression
yeah,
and not ready to actually retain the information, right? Because in school, we go to school, we're prepared, we're at that mindset where we're taking in whatever information is being regurgitated to us at that point, right? Because school is super traditional in the
right,
learning. So our mind is already, fixated on, hey, I'm here to learn. This is a school environment. This is what it's for. But when we're listening to other people, right? Even your parents could have said something like that when you were growing up. I say it to my children all the time. You can be anything you want to be, And my oldest is 7, my youngest is 5. And, it's a new chapter for us, right? Every year, you know this. And so understanding the dynamics and, my mom used to say all the things that I was just like, oh my goodness, epiphany 7 years ago. My mom was like, I've been telling you this since you were like born. But sometimes we're not very receptive to that information and we're just not ready to listen. Also active listening, right?
yeah,
We're listening, like we're hearing you, but we're not really retaining it, right? We're either focused on something else or our mind is so I always say fogged, right? With this reality that we create for ourselves. Like sometimes limited beliefs, we talk about that a lot. Understanding that your current situation is not going to be your future situation, right? That car that you wanted, you'll get it, or you already have it. That house that you wanted, you already bought it. So things that you didn't have years ago, you now have. Understand that and embrace it, right? And really, take it in because sometimes we don't even celebrate the little wins in life. Just the mere fact that I could have bared children. That wasn't really a thing for me when I was like, I was just having this conversation with my husband last night. And I'm like, my 16-year-old self would slap me right now because I am nothing like I was imagining I would be when I was 16. My whole life turned literally 360. So I'm not the same person I was when I was, 16 now that I'm about to hit 40. So
thankfully for
understanding
me.
that, right? Yeah, right. And thank goodness for that. That's a beautiful thing. It's called transformity, whatever you want to call it, evolving, right? We're humans, we're supposed to evolve. So understanding that's a human nature. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to change. There's this influencer and her name escapes me right now, but she talks a lot about that. Like, don't quote me on that. You know, she always says that. She's always like, don't quote me on that because 10 years from now, I may not feel the same. You know what I mean?
Oh,
And it's like,
sure.
you know, don't judge me for something I said 10 or 7 years ago because I'm not that person anymore. And it's so true. It's so true. You know, this world is so unforgiving when it comes to that, which kind of leads me to my second portion to this conversation. And it's pretty much, obviously, you fell in love with podcasting because that's how you started learning about podcasting. But what really got you into podcasting? Because I love podcasting too. I love listening to podcasts. I didn't really know anything about podcasts. And similar to you, I was introduced to it by a book because I'm a bookworm. And they said the same thing. Hey, listen to our podcast. So that's pretty cool how that happened. But I didn't really, like you, I didn't really know about podcasting. I didn't know the business of it. I didn't know that it could be a marketing tool and all the things that you're doing now for these law firms. So tell me a little bit about how that evolved and how that transformed.
Yeah, that was a long journey from listening to doing it for someone else.
Mm.
And a big part of that was also mindset. But really, where it was, I listened to that episode, and within 30 days, I owned $1,000 worth of gear. This
Mm.
microphone that I'm talking into right now. Now, some of the extra things, the shock mount and the arm, all of that got built later, but I bought the mic, which says a lot about my personality, go big or go home.
Mm.
And there was some, when I listened and I felt it was, there's this idea of flow. And Mikhail, I'm going to butcher it. I used to hear his name all the time. Csikszentmihalyi, maybe. I think it might be how
Okay.
you say it.
Great,
Wrote
great,
the
great,
book
great test.
about flow. And I almost in that moment tapped into it. I started thinking and learning and researching about things that interested me that I didn't know about before. And there was this feeling running through my body. It was tingling. Like I woke up with it. I went to bed with it. I was so driven. I was so prolific as well. I wrote so much over a period of a few months while I was learning all of this. And I just dove in head first. I love the medium. And because I'm sitting here and somebody had a conversation however long ago between two people like we're having right now. And right now, in this moment, somebody's listening to this conversation we're having. Maybe a year later, they're driving in their car and they hear something and they go, damn, that hits me. And that's the power of this medium is we can have this conversation one time. We put it out in the world and it takes on a life of its own. Someone can consume it on their time when they're ready for it, and it can have a massive impact on them. And I felt that. And I said, I want to be a part of this. But also, I don't know if you've noticed, I have a lot to say. And I felt that at the time.
Current
I
company
have
included.
a lot to say.
Yeah.
And I was like, I got to do this. I got to be involved in this. And I bought the gear. I taught myself, and it was a lot harder back then too.
Mm.
I had a microphone that was XLR into a mixer with a digital audio recorder and all the cords and the TRS and the TRRS. And it was crazy. And then, oh, you want to take a phone call or a Skype call on your podcast? Oh, we'll run a mix minus. Like it was bananas, but I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. And so I played around nights and weekends in my spare bedroom, at my office at night with one of my colleagues, and eventually started a podcast at my law firm. And found in that moment, kind of found the utility of the marketing tool, the power of it. And eventually, I think it was about a year and a half after I started my podcast in my law firm, I was just in the community. I'm all about it. You know how it is when you're hype about something, you just can't stop doing it. You can't not do it.
Right.
And one of the lawyers in town saw me doing it and he said, hey, I see that you're all involved in this space. Do you think you could help me start a podcast? And I was like, I would love to do that. Of course. And this was at a point where I had already decided that I was done with law. I was shutting the office down. I had no idea what I was going to do. Zero idea. I had a bunch of small ideas. I was like, maybe I could do this. Maybe I could do that. All these entrepreneur ideas, but nothing that was like making me any kind of money. If anything, it was just costing me money.
Right.
And so I go, and he says to me, he's like, well, how about come over tomorrow? All right. I love it. I'll come over tomorrow. And that was my first client.
Mm.
And in over the next month or two, I ended up getting a job at a bank, full-time job at a bank, and started the business. Like chose this one thing as the thing I needed to do. Because at this point, that baby my wife wanted to have was about 8 months old. And
Oh.
yeah. And we needed some money because as I'm winding my law practice down and I'm chasing all my dreams, things are getting heavy.
Yeah.
And my wife was super supportive, but also needed me to understand that, like, I want you to chase your dreams, but your dreams have to pay the bills too. And she's totally right. And so I got that full time job. I had that first client that helped me understand a lot of things, what works for somebody, what doesn't. And then a few months later, I picked up a second client the same way. And then I think it was probably 6 or 7 months after that, I got a third client. And it just kind of went like that, just real slow. Gary Vee said something years ago that I think of every single day. It always takes longer than you think. And that's
Mm-hmm.
something I want people to remember.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's not fast. There are almost zero big breaks in life. You're not going to like so many, most people don't get discovered and boost it up. Most people get a small win that leads to another small win. And then you look back over a few years and you go, well, that was massive over a few years. And it was really slow for the first couple of years. And then it started to gain momentum. It really picked up at COVID. That's when I signed my first national firm. You know,
Mm-hmm.
everybody was at home. They had budget. They needed to continue to market, and podcasts just happened to also be really blowing up at that moment.
Right.
And that was the spark
Mm.
that really made the business legit.
I love it. I love that story. A lot of people need to know that you're right. There's no overnight success. My dad always used to say that. I grew up with my father was more of the dreamer, right? He was more of like, I'm gonna be in the clouds, everything's gonna be beautiful, and whatever. And my mom was more of the realist, like, no, we gotta pay bills.
Right.
I'm gonna work my 9 to 5. I'm gonna do my thing. And so I grew up with those two worlds, right? So I'm a perfect mesh. And sometimes that stresses me out and I become a mess.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I have
Because
both.
it's right. It's like it's very stressful. Like you have, and we were talking about this in the pre-recording about E-Myth, and how he talks
Love it.
about the three. I know it's one of my favorites. And how he talks about the three personalities of an entrepreneur. So check that book out because it really is amazing. And so understanding as an entrepreneur, right? Understanding that it's going to take a little bit and it's going to, however long it takes, right? That's why a lot of businesses fail because a lot of people are not persistent, and are like, forget this. I'm in this couple years and nothing's happening. I'm out. And so unfortunately, that's how it goes.